Good morning, everybody. This morning, I'd like to welcome you with an amazing conversation we're going to have with Annwyn. Annwyn is the author of a book, The Flying in the Face of Grief, which is a book she's previously written and just rewriting at the moment, and it's almost ready to publish. Annwyn is also a spiritual mentor and healer, and she's been working with spirit right since 2009, and she's a channel and a messenger for spirit. And I wrote this down because it's and I didn't want to miss anything out. And also she's an author of another book, The Light in the Abbey, so hopefully she'll tell us a little bit about that as well today. And before we get into talking with Annwyn, her website is www.annwynvibe.com, which I will put all in the introduction of our talk today as well. And if you subscribe to her website, you get a 20% discount on your first consultation or appointment with Annwyn. And she does activated webinars and workshops, activated personal or group mentoring and healing. So lots of gifts. And so welcome, Annwyn. And it's lovely to share time with you today, and looking forward to hearing about you.
Oh, thanks so much. And
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate the invitation to come on, and I really appreciate the people like you who provide these platforms and spend time interviewing people like me and just helping us to get our message out and to get our work, out there. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So tell us a bit about your book and what got you started. The information that I've been looking up on is it started with the loss of your son in 2000, the year
That's
2000.
that's right. Yes, and so prior to 2000, I was, what we'd call an unawakened soul. I was only aware of the physical world. I had read a few books by Jane. Oh, I've forgotten her name. She wrote the books about Seth. They were quite early channel books. I'm sorry, I've forgotten her last name. And I was intrigued by those, but really, that was about as far as I'd got into any sort of spiritual inquiry. So I had, what we call a rude awakening, where something really catastrophic happens and your whole world is turned upside down. And I'm sure a lot of people are relating to, events happening all around them in the world at the moment. It may not necessarily be the death of a dear one, but the death of life as we have known it. And, the people in North Carolina, I'm thinking of, the people in the New Zealand earthquakes 12 years ago, so many people through pandemics, the lockdowns, life has changed significantly and very, very quickly. And so they are also having rude awakenings. So, and this is why I republished the book, because the world has changed so much since I wrote it 12 years ago. But despite the changes and despite a lot more people becoming more aware, death remains a great fear. And so when my son, he died in a car crash. He was almost 18 years old, and he was a very sensitive young man. He'd actually gone through a psychotic episode, which had been triggered by a cocktail of marijuana and hard liquor, and then finally some Ritalin, which he was not prescribed. They were not for him. They were a friend's. But he had tried to turn over a new leaf. He said, "Mum, I'm going off the dope. I'm not drinking." And he changed schools, changed high schools, and he seemed to be really happy. But actually, with the alcohol and the marijuana out of the way, he began to feel the things that were really concerning him. So he was feeling some depression, and that's when his friend, who was prescribed Ritalin, said, "Hey, take some of these. These will cheer you up." Well, they did. He became manic. And you know, it's hard to know what's normal for a teenager and what's not. And so he would suddenly start speaking all of these incredible, almost sermons about Yeshua or Buddha or famous old wise people. And he just seemed to know it. But of course, he was channeling, and I didn't know that at the time. And then he wanted to sell all of his possessions, his drum kit and his camera. And he said, no, you know, we need to be living in the world without material possessions. So what was actually happening was that he was straddling two worlds at that time, because a part of it, his soul knew that he was actually going to be returning to the realms of spirit. And consciously, his human self didn't know that. But yet he was getting this drive to do things, you know, in a more spiritual way. And so he was actually channeling when the times when he was visiting the spirit world, which I guess was in his dream state. So, you know, that was happening. But then he had the psychotic episode, and for 9 months before he passed over, he was, I would say, you know, we had Tim back. His name was Tim, and he was just such a beautiful young man. He'd recovered, and he had found work as a carpentry assistant at the marina that was being built in Littleton, where we lived at the time. That's in the South Island of New Zealand. And then so it was a complete shock when then he went. It was like he'd come through so much journeying, he'd come out of it. And it was like, wow, and now he's gone. So there were so many times prior to that where I thought he might take his life, because he used to get, you know, voices in his head telling him to do that. And
Right.
so, yeah, I wasn't really prepared for him to go so suddenly. So, as you can imagine, it was a hugely traumatic event. But my thoughts immediately went to his sister Laura, who was only 16, and they were absolutely devoted. And that was one of the worst things, was telling her. It just crushed her so much. They were actually twin souls. So when he
Right.
left,
Okay.
yeah, you know what that means. That when
Yeah.
a twin soul is an expanded soul. It's the same
Yes.
soul. They've expanded into two aspects. They're so close. And often twin souls don't reincarnate together. But my children did. They were quite unique in that way. They had many, many, many incarnations together. In fact, so many that from a soul perspective, they'd become very entwined, and it was hard to tell who was who. And this was one of the reasons we later learned why Tim left. It was to
Right.
help Laura become her own personality, her own soul.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, we didn't know that. And but the odd thing was, on the night that he passed over, in fact, I'd gone to collect Laura. We were driving back on a long journey. She was actually 2 hours away from me. We were driving back, and I started to get these little messages in my head. Remember, you knew this. Remember, it's time to remember now. I had absolutely no idea what that was about. That's really weird. But what I felt was so beautiful, because all of a sudden I wasn't rerunning the events over in my head. I was actually calm. I was at peace, and I felt so loved. And so that kind of continued until we got home. And then yeah, and then you know, we got back to the house, and it all came back to us, and we just cried ourselves to sleep. And you know, the body has an amazing reaction to that. It's really amazing, because everything that happens to us happens at a mind, a body, emotional, spiritual level. And my body,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And my body felt the impact, and I actually started to bleed. So, and I bled for around 2 weeks. And it was like
Wow.
my womb was grieving.
Yeah.
And my womb was grieving. It was absolutely amazing. And but that night, when Laura and I woke up in the morning, we looked at each other and burst into tears, remembering what had happened. And then Laura said, "Hey, I felt like the bed was rocking in the night. I felt it wasn't like an earthquake, because we get lots of those in New Zealand." And I
Mm.
said, "Yeah, me too." It's like, first of all, it was like I felt someone was cradling me in their arms like a baby. And then I felt the whole bed moving too. And so we were getting these interesting things happening right from the beginning. But it was about, a few nights later, I can't remember how many, but just a few nights later, the most amazing thing happened. And this is why I've got a white owl on the cover of the book, because
Right.
I was woken out of my sleep, and standing next to the bed was Tim, as clear as anything. Like, I reached out to touch him, but I couldn't move. It was like I was sort of paralyzed, and it was like a time warp. And I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything, but I watched him, and he started to grow taller and bigger. So he was probably around 2 years old when I saw him. Curly hair and freckled face, little chubby cheeks. And then he started growing bigger to, 5, 7, 10, 12 years old, then to teenagers, and then to the age he was when he went. Then he went further. He actually showed me how he would look round about the age of 30, beautiful young man.
Right.
And then I couldn't believe it. Before my eyes, he shape shifted into a magnificent, huge white owl, just like the one behind me, towering over my bed. And it was absolutely magical. I didn't dare breathe. I didn't want to break the spell. And then he lowered and raised his arms a few times, and he flew away. And
Really
that
beautiful.
that was the thing that actually kept me on the planet, because some weeks later, Laura almost took her life. And when that
Right.
happened, I thought, she could go. I mean, you can't watch someone every minute of the day. It made me think, if she goes, what will I do? And I decided I would go too, because I
Yeah.
didn't seem to have any purpose without my children. My whole life was wrapped around my children. And so that's when my guides started coming in and showing me very interesting things and making me curious. Well, what is this? There is more to life. There's not just what we see and what we feel and what we can touch. There is more. So it was that curiosity that made me think, okay, I need to find out what my life is about, why I'm here on the planet, and what the bleep is going on.
Yeah.
And so that was really how my guides got me to stay here. And, by showing me this glimpse into the other world of spirit, that's really how they did it. So I wasn't a psychic or a medium as such, but I was very intuitive, and I received messages that I just knew were true. They call it Gnostic knowing. And as the year, none of this, I must say, none of this excluded me from grieving. I had to grieve because
Yes.
emotional, I
Yeah.
had to grieve, but I resisted it for quite a number of years.
Okay.
I went to the head first, and we have to do both. We must do both. And for me, it was quite an extraordinary series of events, which you'll have to read the book to find out. But I found myself on a sailing yacht, as you do.
Yeah.
And for 6 years, I lived on and off a cruising yacht in the South Pacific Islands. And I had this new partner called Manny. And he was the soul, a very close soul. I had many lifetimes with him as well, though I didn't know it at the time. And he was the one that really dismantled all those beliefs I had about who I was, including the one that my only purpose was to be here for my children. He was the one that sort of took apart all the roles that I was playing. You know, the roles we pick up, who we are in the
Yes. Yeah.
community, who we are through our work, how we identify ourselves, all things that are outside of us and are not really who we are. And so this Manny took those roles one by one apart. And until I didn't know who I was, but we loved each other. And I would
Yeah.
leave the boat in an absolute huff. What have you said? What have you done now? And this big argument would happen, and I'd storm off and fly back to New Zealand. But then my guides would help me to understand what I'd just released. And this is all in the book, and people will relate to it because we all go through this. And it's hard work. It's really tough to realize these things about yourself that you have to own and say, well, I created that, but it's actually not who I am. And then when you get to a point where there's not much of that old self left, it's a really disturbing place. It's what we call the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
So I left Manny for what I thought was the last time when I was on the brink of collapse, because mentally I really didn't know who I was. And I went back to New Zealand to live on land again. And that was when I discovered the writings of Eckhart Tolle. And
Right.
he
Yeah.
writes all about this. It was like, oh my God, you've written this book for me. Thank you, Eckhart Tolle. Honestly, I really thought I was going mad. But he said, look, this is what the ego does. It tries to bring you back to these old roles that it knows, that feel safe, that feel familiar. A lot of our reactions come from the desire to be around things that feel familiar, including
Yes.
familiar emotions. And I was having to let go of everything that felt familiar. So at that point, I really now had to focus on healing my heart because I still felt this huge loss and this huge pain in my chest. And the tricky bit is the love that we hold for our darling loved ones and the pain that we feel when they leave is in the same pantry. When you open that pantry door looking for the love, right beside it on the same shelf is the pain. And
Yeah.
that's the hardest part of grieving is allowing yourself to feel that pain while you feel the love. But when you do that, and it can take quite a while, and you can go to a place sometimes where you think you'll never come back out of it, it goes so deep into pain. Know that you will always come back. And every time you come back, you go higher. You go higher than where you were before. And gradually, the love becomes stronger than the pain. And that's when the magic happens. Because when we heal our hearts, it suddenly becomes a portal almost where we can step through to the realms of spirit and we can commune with our loved ones. So that was the point where I really started communing with Tim myself.
Yeah.
Up until that time, I had gone to channels, very, very good, high quality channels. Nothing about reading your past life or talking to Granny on there. People that could actually channel ascended masters.
Yeah.
Wise, wise, wise beings who had also had human experiences, but were now ascended in the realms of spirit and are working as guides for humanity. So, through their love and their wisdom, I did so much healing over the years, and I still do. And until to the point where I could actually commune with Him myself. And that's the gift of love, and that's the gift of grief. There are so many gifts in grief, and I think a big message in my book is grief is really an untapped tool of transformation. Because if you can transform grief into joy, you start walking this earth as a master. You start mastering what we call um, the matrix of this earth. We transcend it and we go to another matrix, if you want to use those terms. I just talk
Yeah.
about consciousness. So I
Yes.
changed my consciousness when I healed my grief. And that opened me up to other realms of possibility. And that's when life becomes really magical, I tell you. It's exciting. Imagine that. Imagine getting to the point where you say thank you to your loved one that left. Thank you. This is why I am who I am. And you see, Tim and I work together as a team. And I
Yes.
learnt along the way that we have done this many times before. We're an old team. And I've never worked out if it's always me that stays behind or if we take turns.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
work with him from the realms and he stays. But we've done this many, many times before. And so
Yeah.
it's a very, very beautiful collaboration to work in other dimensions.
No, I can relate there in the sense that my mum passed away 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and I had a dream she came to me in my dream that basically the night after she'd passed away, or it might have been a few days after she'd passed away, because I was
Mm.
at her house and then I went home, and um, she showed herself to me like she was going down in a corridor, like a
Yes.
hospital corridor.
Yeah.
And I had hold of her hand, and I remember I was just skipping along, holding her hand, like literally skipping and bouncing. Look, everybody. And I remember shouting it like, look, everybody, here's mum. She's okay. She's
Yes.
absolutely fine.
Yes.
And here she is, and then, of course, she went through the door at the end of the corridor. And then, of course, you wake up in the morning and it's that horrible feeling of, oh, that was a dream. She is actually physically gone. So, yes, I went through that grief,
Yeah.
and part of it was anger as well, because I've had four beautiful daughters, and so she really only got to know my oldest daughter, and my next daughter was a baby, and then two more children after that. But now I reflect back about my mum and think, thank you for the experiences you gave me. And, you can think about the good experiences and the bad experiences, but they really do define who you are. But now I don't even visit the cemetery
No.
because I
Well, that's
don't,
not where she
that's
is.
not where she is. She's in the
No.
consciousness and she's around us all the
She's
time.
with you all the
So,
time. This is the
yeah,
thing. When you
yes,
when you were showing that corridor and you were skipping with her, there's a new term for that now. They're called, well, it's relatively new for me. It's called a shared crossing.
right.
It's when someone visits you. It can happen before a person passes over, while they are passing over, after they pass over.
Yeah,
And actually, I'm being interviewed. There's a wonderful man called Peter Williams who's created an understanding around this and an organization around this. And they're gathering reviews and scientific evidence that this actually happens. It's to help people realize that there are other realms of consciousness and that we
yeah,
can overlap. So they called it, and that's called the Shared Crossing Project. And so it's very comforting for people to know that their loved ones, are somewhere else, just like your mother wanted you to know. And so
yeah,
that's the same thing when Tim showed me when he came to me afterwards and then became the owl, that's also a shared crossing. Yeah, it's quite fabulous,
yeah.
isn't it? And isn't it
It is.
amazing that
Yeah,
we've got these wonderful messengers uh, um, who are showing people that basically there is no death. It's
yeah,
just another, and that's why the subtitle on my book is The Ever Being of Life, because it's eternal. And you can see
yes,
the infinity sign
yeah,
below it, which it is ever going, ever, ever, ever happening. And we simply change form because when we decide to experience life on earth again, we have to take a human physical form to do that. But we are still spirit. And the most of us is still in spirit. This is just a little part of us that turns up, as Annwyn or as Belinda. The rest of us, the main part, and loves us and guides us and encourages us. So this is what we want people to know and to remember, because
yeah,
so much of this has been discarded from our knowing, from our wisdom, and it's been taken over by very organized beliefs about death and life and, religion. I'm speaking of here. And if people still want to follow other people's organized beliefs, that's fine because maybe that's part of your journey. And I honor and respect that. But for those who maybe started out as I did, following other people's beliefs, when you get to the point that it doesn't feel right anymore, just, you kind of start wondering if there's more, that's the beginning of the awakening. And that's a really exciting journey to go on. And for many, grief is the catalyst of
yeah,
that awakening. So hopefully, my book will help people to go through the journey and to even shorten it because, I spent so much time working on releasing who I thought I was. There's a lot more work around that already known now. So I think people would be starting from a different place. And that, again, that's why I republished the book and revised it because there were things I didn't need to say now that I said 12 years ago. And there were new things that I could say that I couldn't really have said 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's up to the minute. And also there's a very interesting article, a very interesting chapter about the earthquakes that happened in Christchurch, New Zealand in
Yeah.
2011, and how a whole city responded to that. And actually it was their grief that triggered me into writing the book that I wrote then and then
Right.
published a
Okay.
year later.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always think of them when I hear about the big floods and the hurricanes that are happening around the planet at the moment. So
Yeah.
hopefully people will, you know, take some hope from that as well and learn from that too. Yes.
Absolutely. And in your book, what other ways does it help people? Can you don't want to give away too much information because we'd really like people to read your book, but what other ways does it help people?
Um, it helps people to release their fear of
Yeah.
death and
Yeah.
also to not think of grief as being a burden that cripples you for life and therefore must be avoided at all costs, but to embrace it and to go with it and to fly higher than before. There's particularly an article around how spirit perceives suicide. And that's a big topic for us at the moment again now too. And um, when I lived in Littleton at the time of Tim's passing in 2000, our little town, it's a little it's the harbour of Christchurch, and it's just a little hillside town, but quite a close knit community. And our little community had been rocked by several youth suicides, and that was
Right.
only 3 months before Tim died. So we're all kind of, you know, reeling from that. And one of the boys that took his life was Floyd, and he was about 16 or 17. Well, when I thought I'd finished writing my book, um, I was approached by a group of souls, a huge group of souls. And I won't tell you how they approached me because that's quite an interesting part of the book. But
Yeah.
basically, they let me know, and I didn't work it out for a while. It was a bit thick, but I gradually realised they wanted me to talk about suicide. Now, I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that because Tim hadn't suicided, but then I thought, well, gosh, so many young people have, and you know, and not just young, but so many people feel that sense of hopelessness and despair that they think that's their only choice. So, long story short, we actually channeled Floyd
Yeah.
from the realms of spirit. We spoke directly to Floyd. He told us why he did what he did, how he was feeling, and he really wanted people to understand that there was no punishment attached to this. He'd been brought up in a strict Catholic upbringing. He was terrified he would be punished by God. He said there is no punishment, there's no
Yeah.
shame. But he did regret that he'd hurt the people he'd left behind. He wanted them to know he was all right. He also wanted them to know that people who take their lives are encouraged to come back quite soon,
Right.
reincarnate quite quickly, and pick
Yeah.
up life again and achieve what they had come to do.
Yeah.
So it's a very beautiful, touching chapter, and I hope it will help release the guilt and the regrets that those left behind often have and can be very burdened by when someone in their family takes their life.
And it's the blame, that people go through the
Self-blame.
what
Yeah,
could I have done?
exactly.
Why? Just all those questions and
Exactly.
yeah, mainly the blame and could I have done things differently? What if I'd
Yeah.
done this? And yeah,
Yes,
because suicide is a big subject
it is.
and it's happening a lot.
Yes.
I personally have somebody that his son took his own life 12 months ago,
Mm.
and I know he's definitely looking forward to connecting with you. So that's a
Oh,
really good thing.
yes.
And recently, I know of another young boy who was only 15, took his own
Yes.
life maybe about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And even not far from where I live in Waikanae in Otaki last year, there was two 12-year-old girls, and
Yes.
Yeah,
And this is
one,
what Spirit have said, that young children will be doing this
yeah,
because these are the new children coming
yeah,
through. These are the highly evolved souls who carry so much light and are here as our way showers and our teachers and our guides. Life is very difficult for them to come into environments that are very dense with
yeah,
emotions and thought forms, and the vibrational frequencies are very hard for them to manage. And some of them can't manage. Now, some of the work that my son Tim does in the realms is he works with these ones, and he's
right.
he's
Yeah,
now known as Katush.
okay.
Katush is a collective of souls, and the vibrational frequency means eternal, universal love. And he does many, many things, but one of his roles is coming to young people in their dream state, and they know him because they already knew him in the spirit realm
Yeah,
before they incarnated, and he comes in their dream state and they remember when they wake up. And it's very beautiful work because he's encouraging them, reminding them of what Earth is like and how to manage the frequencies here and the behaviors here. So yes, but not everyone's, we are going to see this, which is going to seem, an awful tragedy, and it is.
yeah,
But it is part of yes, trying to get these highly evolved souls, incarnated on the earth to help us through into this golden age that we're moving into. And then, of course,
yes.
we've got the old ducks like me, who I'm in my seventh decade, and we've been, working in this way for a long time. Um, and then we've got the new ones coming in as well. So
Yes,
it's a beautiful collaboration, and we've got so much help from Spirit. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I think, a strong message is to remember that all that is going on, even though that is invisible, but not to engage with the visible world, which is going to show you that we're all on the brink of doom and all the rest of it. You don't engage with that. Just don't
no,
engage. I keep a very distant peripheral look because if I need to make a movement or an adjustment, I want to be informed about it. But that's not engaging with the
yeah,
news. It's just being prudent, if there are things to know about. So, yeah, thank you for talking about the young ones who are finding it too difficult to stay. It's a great
you're
sadness.
welcome. Yes, because there's so many changes happening so rapidly. And,
Mm.
you talk about the rude awakenings. My experience is there's also people that are just having, all of a sudden, having um, awakenings, and they, in those structured belief systems, and they're going, well, this just doesn't, there's more, this doesn't fit with me anymore, and they're
Yeah,
searching and they're reaching
yeah,
out to
yeah.
people like yourself, and with the work that I do as well with
Yes.
quantum hypnosis. And so
I think
and
it's
it's,
beautiful that work that you're doing and all of the
thank you.
practitioners because you're giving people a glimpse into the spirit realms and to
Yeah,
other aspects of their soul. And that
yeah,
is so helpful. It's so helpful to see where patterns that you're dealing
yeah,
with in this lifetime have come from. And because I was at the hairdresser's the other day, and the hairdresser was so discombobulated. I tell you what, she was so discombobulated. I had gone there asking her to embrace my grey, which I've been doing for several months.
yeah.
But look, the grey has not, and this showed me her state of mind, and I don't blame her, and I'm not cross at all, and I'm okay about it. But it just shows you she didn't hear that request. She didn't
Right,
hear it
yeah,
because and because she started telling me there's all these things suddenly going on in her life out of nowhere, and she's feeling triggered and emotional about all sorts of things, and she can't think why. And while she's telling me that, I get a text from my daughter Laura, who's now 40, saying, "Oh gosh, Mum, I'm up, I'm down, I can't find the middle ground." And I said, the hairdresser's feeling the same way. She said, "Oh, thank God, someone else." I said, "Yeah, it's the whole planet. The whole planet's going through this." So I
yeah,
started talking about this to my hairdresser, and she said, "Oh
yeah,
my gosh, is that what's going on?" And I said, "Yes." And as a result of that, I'm going to hold an event in our area at the end of the month called "Are You Wondering What the Bleep is Happening?" And this is for the beginners who have no
right.
idea. And I
Yeah,
feel so
that's
sorry for
fantastic.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel so sorry for people who don't, it's bad enough knowing what's going on and still experiencing what you're going through, but to actually not know what the background is behind it, it must be really frightening.
Oh, absolutely. And, I love connecting with like-minded people and, in our environment that we have been already be doing this growth and gathering this understanding and the information. And I see it very important and responsible for helping guide people that
Yeah.
don't quite understand what's happening and where we're heading and what's happening. And they're stuck in
Yeah.
the doom and gloom
Yes.
and they can't see
Yeah.
that this is necessary to help us shift, because we just cannot continue living
No.
in the way we have been. Yeah.
And this is why, shows such as yours are so important because how else do they know?
Yeah.
If they're only being shown this other doom picture and, everything that's bad about the world, how do they know how to restart and to, that's what my hairdresser said, well, where do I begin? How do I start? And I said, okay, it's not a 2-minute conversation, but
No, just come and do my workshop.
come and
Yeah.
do something together and we'll have some
Yeah.
fun and find out and give you some
Yeah.
strategies. Like I said, for example, let's clear the energy in your salon every day, at the end of the day. She
Yeah.
said, oh my God, how do you do that? So I said, okay, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Simple things like that, and just how to stay in peace when everybody else around you is running around, feeling crazy and angst and yeah,
Yeah.
how to be a pillar of peace in your society, in your community.
Yeah.
That's a good
Absolutely.
start. Mm.
Yeah. And coming back to your book, Flying in the Face of Grief, has Tim been because he's your main guide,
He's one of my main guides. I do have
one of your main
quite a
guides? Yeah,
team.
I could
Yes.
imagine. But did he channel information for you to write the book? Was it channeled?
Um, yes and no. He would
Okay.
plant things in my way and
Yeah.
help certain things to happen so that I experience them.
Yeah.
Because this book is a very embodied, experienced book.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's different parts to it because sometimes I've gone to ascended masters and we've had channeled information come through, which I've shared. It's so
Yeah.
useful for any, it's not just applying to me or Laura, it's general universal wisdom, which is really beautiful. And then at times knew that Tim was working behind the scenes because situations would come up. And the fact that I went sailing, who goes sailing? I was 50 and I suddenly decided I wanted to learn to sail. But that was crucial for me to meet Manny, who was crucial for me dismantling my mental constructs.
Yeah.
Then when I came back ashore, he sent a messenger. All the way through the book, you'll see that messengers arrived. Right in the early days, a woman rushed up to me in the street, someone I hardly knew, and said, "You've got to go and meet this woman, Ishtar. She's a clinical psychologist, but she's also a Gestalt therapist, and she's very attuned, very spiritual." And I just kind of felt, this woman's crazy. She had a business card ready for me, thrust it into my hand. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Promise." And she was so insistent that I did. And the night before my appointment, I had two very lucid dreams, which were incredible. And
Yeah.
they're in the book, so I won't go into
Okay.
them. But when I look back, I can see the setups from Tim. This is Tim.
Yeah.
Now, more recently, I was in Portugal. This was two years ago, in November, so nearly 2 years ago. And Tim was with me all the time when I was in Portugal. There was something that I still don't have a lot of clarity about why, but he had let me know, I really want you when you're in Portugal to go to the best surfing beach. Now, he was a very keen surfer in his life as Tim. And I arrived in Portugal, and right at the end of the day, I got to the beach just in time to watch the sunset go down. It's absolutely spectacular. And I felt him very much with me. And I noticed that there was a real surfing culture, lots of young people, people living in conveys, but people just loving life. It had a very joyful, light atmosphere, and there were lots of girls surfing, really gorgeous girls. And I was thinking, oh, I can see where you've been hanging out, Tim. Of course. Of course, Tim is many, many things. He's still Tim, but he's still a highly evolved soul as well. But
Yes.
anyway, before I have to go back a bit because on the train that day, I was nearly at the place on the west coast of what was it called? It's in Sagres. It's on the very southern western tip of Portugal. But the train had stopped. We're nearly there. And right opposite where the train platform was, I just looked out the window, and there in a car park was a van, and it was a surfing school, and it had a logo, a slogan on it. It said, "Ring Tim for a good time surfing."
Oh dear.
I mean, what a crack up. You know, what are the
Absolutely, yeah.
chances of that? Did he just, I don't know, did he get out there with his cosmic paintbrush and just put the name Tim there? Was it actually Tim surfing? It probably was. Why not? There's a lot of people come from other countries and run things there, like surfing schools. So
Yeah.
even Tim's not a Portuguese name, but it could be someone from England. So I just thought that's so fun. I mean, that's classic. Just one of the many, many, many things that happen. But yeah, he's always around. I forgot what your question was now. Have I answered it?
I believe so, yes, yes. Yeah, we just went back to talking about your book and
Yes.
Tim being your guide, or at least one of your guides. Yeah.
Yes. And of course, the
And
book is encoded. You know, the energies of
yeah,
spirit are they channel through me when I speak, but also when I write.
yeah,
And they actually that when you read the book, the reader will feel the energies.
yeah,
It's what we call an act. That's what we call an activated book. So this is quite new. And of course, I
yeah.
can't go to a mainstream publisher telling them I've got an activated book. They think I was
No.
mad. So that's why I self-publish and but I will try to find a publisher as well if I can along the way.
And have you got a set published date when the book's going to be released?
I haven't got a set date. It's very close now. I believe it's within weeks.
Yeah,
So I'm just designing a landing page, and we'll put that in your link so that people can go straight to the landing page, and
fantastic. Yeah,
they'll be able to click on it and order it if it's out, or go on the wait list or something. But there'll be an action that you can take for that. Because I know what it's like. You know, you hear about something 4 weeks before it arrives and you've forgotten about it. Life is busy, life is
yeah,
complex. So we'll just help to keep that in your mind that this book is coming. And I think it's applicable not just for someone who's lost a child, but for anybody who's going through change and
yeah,
quite frankly, who isn't?
yeah,
So
yeah. Everybody is.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
there's a famous person who sort of encapsulated what writers do when they write stories. And this applies mainly to fiction, but they talk about the hero's journey. It's Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey. And because I've had to learn about writing over the years, I recognize that my book is a living example of the hero's journey. I'm not a hero, but it's the process that you go through of having what they call the inciting event, the big catastrophe that happens, how you respond to it, how you might run away from it, how it changes you, and then how you have trials and tribulations as you try and sort this out.
yeah.
And then finally, how it really rocks your world, and that's the dark night of the soul. And then the breakthrough, the aha, that's the real climax of the book. And then you want to share it with others. You want to share what you've learned with others. And that's what my book is about. So, and
Absolutely.
I think we're all heroes to be living on the earth at this time,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
We're all so brave, we're so courageous as the courageous souls who were allowed to come through because we're all selected to be here at this time. And I just did honor every single one of us for being here and finding our way through this, finding our way home.
Well, I look forward to the publishing, and I'm first on the list.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I look forward to it. And
Oh.
would you like to share any information about because on your website you've got a little link in there to the light in the Abbey.
Yes, so that's that's a book that I was working on, and I am working on, but then this book, Flying in the Face of Grief, sort of came very much in my presence and said, you need to get this back out there. So, and also it happened at the same time that my main character, the abbot in my other book, had sort of locked the door. This happens when you're writing books that are inspired and channeled and all the rest of it. You have to wait for certain vibrations to settle again. So I felt that I was locked out of that book. So I thought, okay, this is a good time to come back and republish this one. So yes, now when this is flying, this is about to fly, I can go and focus again on the light in the Abbey. Now, this is a story that's set in the 1500s in Tudor England. It's at the time of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, all those famous people. And it's actually based around a past life of mine. And you know how you do past life regressions? Well,
Yes.
and if I'd come to you, you probably would have pulled up this life in a session like you do. But it actually came up for me when I was visiting Glastonbury, England, where this story takes place. I was visiting there in 2010. And it's also told this, how this happens is told in the first book. But I had a remembered lifetime as the abbot of Glastonbury. And so this is what the book is based around, but it's also a big look at how the teachings of Christ, Yeshua, and Mary Magdalene were inverted and corrupted basically, and taken on by the church. And so I'm an abbot who actually understands this. So I'm straddling two worlds because I love the pagan world. I love the Druids. In fact, I am a Druid as well,
Yeah.
secretly. And I'm living this heretical life, unknown to many people. I have a few people that know. And so it's navigating the world in those times, basically living in two different dimensions. And actually, there's a lot of parallels to now because those of us who are awakened, to some degree, we are straddling two worlds. We're straddling the old world and having to still be in it, but not of it.
Well, we can actually be, like you say, those that understand
Yeah.
um, we are multi-dimensional beings,
Yes.
but
Yes.
and it's come through in my work as well.
Yeah.
Because interestingly enough, I don't actually take, unless you're a person that comes back, for more sessions. In the sessions, your higher self or your subconscious takes you to the life that they want you to bring through at that time.
Okay. Yeah.
And what's come through is that one particular session when I was talking to a lady, in hypnosis, and I said, "Am I talking to your subconscious?" And the answer that came back was, "Well, we've got to try and put this in human terms so you will understand." But they said that this soul, this person that was with me, lives simultaneous lives at the same time,
Oh, yes, yes,
and they were the overseer
yes,
of all of those
yes,
lives.
yes. I've been told that
So
too. I'm the mothership of several other aspects of
yes,
me alive on the
yeah,
planet at this time. Yeah, and other
yeah,
other places too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's just so intriguing, isn't it? I mean, and yes, that's
Absolutely.
getting into it quite deeply. I mean, but it shows you, it's another example that illustrates the ever being of life. There is
Yeah,
absolutely no end to this consciousness that we are.
yeah,
No end.
yeah,
There are no
yeah.
endings.
No, that's right. But if it
That-
was a session where somebody wasn't quite ready for that
That's
information,
right.
then
Yeah,
it doesn't come through.
that's
But
right.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
right. And the way my book is written, The Flying in the Face of Grief, I don't go into that complexity. It is
yeah,
written as a conversational, very easily read, down to earth, grounded book, but the magic is there.
yeah,
And, people will see it and they'll feel it. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And touching on very real subjects that people
yeah,
can relate to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, totally,
yeah,
totally.
yeah. And with your activated webinars and workshops, what can people get from your workshops?
It's the I call them activated again because spirit are working through me
Yeah.
so fully. And so when I could read something, I could read a menu. I don't mean to boast, but I could read a menu to a room full of people and they'd be activated.
Right. Yeah.
Not to make them hungry, but my voice carries vibrational frequencies. My
Yeah.
eyes, my hands, it's in my field. I've been so activated by spirit
Yeah.
through my own evolving journey of, transforming grief and all the work I've been doing since, but also because spirit send me off to sacred places all around the world,
Yeah.
which really I become a channel of those energies. I'm also activating those places. It's a two-way process. That's really told about in my third book, another book that's coming after the Abbey
Fantastic.
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that really talks about my current work. But it's interesting, it's good to have the flying in the face because that shows people where I started. You can start from an unawakened person and
Yes.
completely change your life.
Yeah.
I believe I'm living several lifetimes within this life, but I just don't die in between. I could choose to, and I've
Yeah.
had opportunities to go back to the realms. You can come back now if you want to, Annwyn. And
Yeah.
I take about 3 days to decide, and then I decide to stay. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very interesting thing that's going on now.
Yeah. And also your activated personal
Yeah.
group mentoring and healing that you do
Yeah.
with
So
people.
sometimes groups invite me to speak to them. It could be
Yeah.
a group of people that are already meeting, and that's often a Zoom meeting because I live in a pretty remote place and then I travel around too. So Zoom is usually what I'm doing nowadays. But
Yeah.
and then they might have a particular topic. They might want me to talk about the fifth dimension or grief or that anything like that. Um, and then I also offer one-on-one mentoring sessions with people, just to really help them identify what they're stuck with. They'll come with a presenting issue, and we'll trace that back and look at where that's come from, how to unglue it, and how to move forward, and how to do things differently, in the future. And this is supported very often by light language and toning, even songs, soul songs that their soul recognizes, channeled messages. I'm not a psychic medium that will just channel messages like that. Yet I'm completely overlighted by spirit, and they find their way of working through me in a very direct way. Yeah. So it's to soothe the pathways of people and to help them feel less discombobulated and more at peace. And yeah, really just to get them unstuck and get them moving again until the next bit comes up. But I'm all about empowering people. I'm not
Yes.
looking for followers. I'm not looking for, you can follow me on Facebook. That really helps because it helps the algorithms. But I'm not looking to recruit people or enroll, I just want to share what I know. If it resonates, hooray, let's get together. It's as simple as that.
Well, we'll make sure that we put your Facebook link as well in the information after the podcast. So
Oh, thank
so
you.
people can just click on it and go straight there to have a
Yeah,
look, as
thank
well
you.
as your landing page link.
Thank
And
you.
one thing that is also very intriguing, you contributed to Freddie Silver's one of his books. Portals, yes.
Yes, yes. So, for those that don't know Freddie Silver's work, he's an alternative researcher and an alternative historian. He's very, very awakened. He's very intuitive, and he's been joining the dots all around the planet,
Yeah,
linking up the legends, what we've called legends and myths, which are really true stories, historical stories, that
yeah,
have been sort of undermined and just reduced to, well, it's just a myth or a legend. But there is truth in these old stories, and he's providing the evidence. And yes, so a lot of his books were about that, but he was invited to write this book, Portals, for a publishing group called Sacred Stories, and they take an expert in the field. to write a book, and then they invite other people to contribute their stories. So this book is about portals. What what a portal is. Often it's a place on the earth which has very um, lots of ley lines, lots of electromagnetic connections running through it, where they say, the veils are thin, which means you can access other realities. And if you approach these places in a meditative way without expectations and just sit and go within, often you'll be shown things. And so it's places like Sedona, Glastonbury, but all over the planet. There are portals everywhere, even can be in your house. And anyway, so my story, they accepted my story, which I was absolutely thrilled about because I love Freddie's work. And that story actually features in Flying in the Face of Grief. It actually occurs within that book. And then I lifted it out and I had to change it a bit for publishing rights. And it was shared in Freddie's book. So, yes. If you're interested in
Fantastic.
those sorts of things and sacred sites, some of the other stories come from Machu Picchu, places in Ireland, all over the world. It's really fascinating. Thank you.
And Kura Tawhiti in New Zealand. Has he
Yes,
featured that in the book? Yeah.
yes, that's where my story takes place. Kura Te Whiti means a university or a school, a place of learning from a very, very far away place. And it relates to a very sacred site in the middle of the South Island of New Zealand. Its common name is Castle Hill, and
Yes.
rock climbers go to climb all over it. But the initiates, the ones that know the other purpose of that place, go there for ceremonies and rituals and meditations because the energies are phenomenal. And you'll read about my phenomenal experience in the book. But yeah, put it on your bucket list. If you live in New Zealand, or if you're coming to New Zealand and you're interested in those places, that's definitely a place to visit.
Yes, I've been there myself, and I went with a group of people from C5 Aotearoa
Right.
and an expedition down earlier this year actually, and had a very amazing experience there. And yeah, but that's a whole nother story.
Yes. Yes, that would
But
be
I s-
a good interview to do with someone. Or we should interview you about that.
well, maybe a collective of people, because there was a collective of people there that had different experiences, but we all went there for the same reason. So,
Yeah. Awesome.
which was ET contact. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
and it was definitely happening. So,
And even that word
yes,
ET, I mean, we have to lose that, don't we? Because it's sort of
absolutely.
conjures up all
Yes.
sorts of things,
Yeah.
but it's just our other aspects, our soul family, our guides,
Yes.
our star brothers and sisters. We all
Yes.
came from the
Yeah.
stars.
Yeah.
We're all made of
We
stardust,
did.
they tell us.
Yes. Yes. Well, and thank you very much for your time today. And like I say, I will put all of your links in the brief of our podcast today. I really look forward to your book coming out, and also the other book when you republish that the Light in the Abbey. That
Oh, when
sounds
that comes
very
out.
interesting. So
Yes.
let's get back together again and do this
Okay.
again, and we'll talk about that book when you're ready to
Oh,
publish as well. So
that would be
thank you for your
wonderful.
time
Thank
today.
you.
Yeah,
Oh, you're so
yeah.
welcome, and I'm just so delighted to share with you. And as I say, I really appreciate the work that you and others do to
Thank you.
support. We're all walking each other home, aren't we?
Yes,
We're all
we are.
one.
Yeah.
Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Bye.